Hello there, and welcome to another episode of The Transplant's Tale. Today, I am talking with our guest, Michael Taylor. Say hello, Michael.
Hello, how are you?
Good, good, good. How are you?
I'm doing good.
Good, good, good. So, your episode is going to be a bit different than a lot of our other episodes, but I think it's still really relevant and impactful. So, can you tell the people just what your transplant-ish experience was?
Yeah. First of all, I'm excited. I'm really excited to have this conversation, and excited for all the things you're doing.
Thanks.
So you asked me if I would be interested, and definitely interested. But my thought is, you want me to talk about my transplant experience. So I grew up in Philly. I moved to another part of Philly. The furthest outside of Philly that I got was like a block across the border. I've never left Philly. I've never lived anywhere else, so it seemed like a strange request for me to be on there. But you asked if I'd be willing to talk about my experience being deployed with the Air Force. So if that counts as a transplant, then my experience with the Air Force my experience with the Air Force is 7 months of training that took place in Texas, and then 6 months of deployment more recently, and that was around the Middle East. And if that counts, then yeah, I had a temporary transplant.
Yeah, I think it definitely counts in the sense that you are in an environment for an extended period of time that is unfamiliar from the surroundings that you were brought up in. And I think a lot of people can identify with that experience, whether they're studying abroad or whether they're in deployment themselves. So, can you talk to what led you to end in the first place?
Yeah, great question. I suppose, I could say what others might say. It's been an interest of mine to be a part of something that's greater than me, to be a part of something that matters. I think that's part of my Christian faith too, is a connection with God, a connection with the church, the body of Christ, and being associated with that, with something that's greater than me. And there's just something that has inspired me about people who live a life of sacrifice, who have sacrificed, whether their lives literally or have lived out their life in service to protecting others. It just seems like a high calling and a meaningful life to live. So it wasn't my original trajectory to be in the military, and I wanted to do ministry, and that didn't pan out for me. But I found out that I could be in the Air Force National Guard, so it's part-time work, and I could be part of that broader, noble mission without needing to um, upheave my entire life. And active duty is great. I very much respect service members who go active duty, and they serve their full-time military. But it didn't work for me, because by the time that I was convinced that it was my time to enlist, I already had a boy. My son was 2 years old, turning 3 years old when I enlisted, and I couldn't afford to commit to active duty and be away from him. So I found out that there's an option with the Air National Guard to be in the Air Force and to live locally most of the time, but still deploy as needed. And I thought it was a great option. And so yeah, I guess it was patriotic ideals that got me into it, you could say.
Nice. So you mentioned your son. You mentioned that you were away for like 7 months first, and then the 6 months the next time. And both those times, of course, you did have your son. So, um, what would you say, and like, what advice would you give to parents who, do end up getting deployed or have to go away to that training?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. It is critical to have a strong support system at home, and I really have that, and I don't think that I could do this if I didn't have a strong support system. I wouldn't have done it if I didn't have a strong support system of family, mainly family, and also friends who have surrounded my son, and have taken care of him uh, with me and his mom. So I, at the time that I enlisted, like I said, he was 2 years old, turning three. I believe he was turning three, and that was a difficult season of my life. And I won't get into the details of why that is, but it was a very challenging season of my life, and enlisting was part of the change that I needed. It's part of growing up. I think I was 26 years old when I enlisted, and I still wasn't grown yet, and I needed to sort out my life in some major ways. And so the Air Force provided an opportunity for me to learn structure and discipline in ways that I just hadn't figured out yet. And so it was a good option for me, and I'm glad that I did it because I've learned so much, continue to learn and grow by being in the Air Force. But if if I was alone in my parenting, I obviously could not have left him. So, but his mom and I aren't together, but she's a good mom, and she really cares for him. We've never had any disagreement on him as our priority, and my parents are heavily involved, and other family members of mine have been just heavily involved in his life. And so, if I didn't have the the ability to trust that I had that support system that he was going to be taken care of, then I would not have left. And then being away for so long, I was able to trust that he was being taken care of. So even through the difficult moments, yeah, I had full trust in that. So that's the biggest piece. If if you're going to be away from your kids, I mean, you have to know who they're going to be with. So I clearly it should be clear that that's important for anyone,
Absolutely.
whether you're transplanting or not, whether you're taking your kids or leaving your kids. I can't stress enough the importance that community has been for me in my life
Absolutely.
in supporting me and shaping me and caring for him. And so that's the first piece. Make sure you're deeply embedded in support and family and community.
Yeah, I love that. And I feel like community is a theme that comes up on every single episode. Obviously, you are part of said community for me,
Yeah,
along
it's
with
great.
pretty much everybody else that has been on this show. So I think it definitely is like a very impactful part of any experience, near or far. Because I feel like even if you stay in your hometown, I feel like it's also still because people move, things
Right.
change around you, but keeping that strong core community, I feel like is a big part of growth. So thank you for sharing that. Um, and so with that, speaking of community, for the times that you were away in those different environments, how did you go about creating community? I know, like, of course, you were um, a part of an organized community, but you still have to kind of navigate that and build those connections. So, what were some ways that you did that?
Yeah, that's a good question. During training, I took on a role as what you might call a student leader throughout training, and it gave me a lot of responsibilities, uh, looking after other airmen in training, and I'm not sure that I would do it again because of just the amount of responsibility it was during that time, but maybe I would. And so it just gave me a position where I was meeting, other airmen in training as they were coming in, and so that gave me an opportunity to meet people. But for but so that's training. That's different from deployment, right? So deployments for me, and I'm sure it depends on the career field. Different careers, people will deploy with a different unit structure depending on what their job is. But for me in my career field, I deployed with people who I work with,
Mhm.
and we also went with a team of people we don't know, but I had a strong team that I was with of people who I work with regularly when we report once a month. So we know each other, and there's really not I don't know of other experiences that are like a deployment. Maybe college years, living in dorms. I'm not sure, but deployment was a unique experience for me in living with people 24/7. People
Yeah.
who you might choose to live with, you might not choose to live with these people if you had your choice.
Right.
So so you make it work. We're fortunate. My team was to live in a time in the service and to be in locations where we had things to do on base. Good opportunities for playing sports, um, good gyms to work out in, and other recreational activities that were provided in the locations that we were at. And so there was a lot of opportunity for us to spend time outside of work to bond with each other.
Mm.
My personal experience was a little different because I was one of the few people. There were some, but we were the minority of people on my team are parents. So I was one of the old heads, you might say, and so it was really important to me to be in contact with my son throughout the time. When I was deployed, I believe he was 8 years old, and so I didn't realize how difficult being away from him would be. I did it the first time for training when he was actually, by the time I got to training, he had just turned 4 years old because I enlisted, but you don't ship out right away
Right.
sometimes. So anyway, yeah, he just turned 4 years old, and my life was so challenging at that time that it's hard to say what was difficult about being away.
Mm.
Like I said, I needed to sort out key pieces of my life and my identity um and my own the structure of my life really. And so it's hard to say why that was difficult. With the deployment, by the time he was 8 years old and I was felt firmly established as a dad and loving that as
Mm.
the best part of my life, I just was naive about how difficult it was going to be away from him. Because deployment sounds great. I love camping. I can sleep in a tent, no problem. I don't need necessarily running water, and deployment sounded like a grand camping trip. In some ways, it was,
Mm.
but to be away from him at this point, at that point, 8 years old, it was just emotionally, I missed him in a way that I just didn't account for, and I wanted to know what's going on in his life, and so it was important to me to be in touch with him. So I felt like I wasn't as connected with the community on deployment with my team as I could have been, because I was waking up at 3 a.m. every morning, because it's the only time in my son's schedule that I could talk to him.
Mm.
About a 10-hour difference in time
Okay,
zones.
that was gonna
So
be my question. Okay.
yeah, 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 yeah. So I was far away, and so the
Yeah.
only time that I could call him is before he was going to bed, and for me that was 3 a.m. So I was waking up 3 a.m. every morning, getting on the phone with him, and then I would stay awake until it was time to go to work. So by the time that everyone else wanted to run off and play soccer, I just didn't have the energy. So
Exhausted.
I was hopping in bed and preparing for my next phone call. So in some ways that made it more challenging, because I felt connected with him, but in some ways isolated from my members of my team. So
Mm.
it was it it was more challenging than I thought it would be.
Yeah, that's real. That's real. And speaking of challenges, how obviously we can't get into all the details because it's the government, but what do you feel like were some of the ways that you coped and like overcame challenges that you were experiencing there?
Yeah, yeah. I think I can say this, that the Air Force has a good system, according to my experience, for providing support to airmen. And I had the opportunity to get counseling while I was there. Um, there are counselors and therapists
Mm.
on in the locations where I was at, and so there was a time where adjusting to life over there and being away from family, that I wasn't sleeping well, and I was able to meet with a therapist on base.
That's
And so
awesome.
it was great. They provided that service, and we talked about all kinds of things. Some of them were deeply, personal things, and some of that was really practical, like helped me to get in a rhythm of good sleep schedule and circadian rhythms, and which is difficult. Was difficult. We were traveling a little bit, and
Yeah.
so yeah, it was super helpful to be able to talk to somebody about that. And so whether that's in the military or on the civilian side, I have gotten into therapy at different times in my life, and it's highly recommended. I don't recommend, if you're going through a difficult time, don't be alone. So it's been great. So the Air Force provides, I could talk to chaplains. My superiors were always, available and supportive for me. So I had a lot of support from the community there to unpack the challenges that I was facing, and so I'm grateful for that.
I love that. Thank you. And so, what general part of the world were you in, and what were some of the things you experienced that you never experienced in Philadelphia? Like
Yeah,
fun stuff. I mean, I guess it can be non-fun stuff, but like, you
yeah.
know, just what are some fun?
There, for most part, we were operating on base, but there were different times that we had opportunity to go off base. So I saw some of the um yeah, some of the trips that we took. I was had the opportunity to go to Petra. That was cool. And we went to, where else did we go? We we were able to go on a desert trip and ride camels.
Oh,
So
nice.
yeah, so that was cool. That
Mm.
was cool. Yeah, it was few and far between that we actually got off base, but in the grand scheme of things, that compared to it's a part of the world that otherwise I don't know if I would have the opportunity to be in. So
Yeah.
so for the most part. we were working, but when we did get those opportunities, it was really nice.
I love that. I like have xenophobia, but something about riding a camel like seems cool. So how like can you describe riding the camel?
Yeah, it's like riding a horse, except it's a little higher because there's that extra,
I can't.
it's just that extra little bit of
Yeah.
a hump to it. So if you've ridden a horse before, it feels similar. You just higher. I don't know if you've tried it, you know what it's like. I mean, it's a powerful animal,
Yeah.
and you hop on and hold on tight. I guess I don't know. I mean, that sort of thing doesn't really phase me. Um, so I don't know what to tell you if it's something you're nervous about.
Yeah.
I thought it was fun.
Yeah. I'll try it one day. We'll see. So kind of like rewinding a little bit, do you have any choice in like where you get a chance to go, or is it just like you go where most needed?
Ooh, that's a good question. I can't answer that question
Okay,
for Air Force in general because it really depends on your career field.
that's fair.
It depends on if you go active duty, then you do get some say in where you go, but for the most part, what I understand is that you can be sent where the most need is. For me, I enlisted in the Air National Guard and was able to know ahead of time what my primary duty station was going to be.
Yes.
And then as far as deployments, there were two options. So uh, we could sign up to go to Africa or we could sign up to go to the Middle East. And even then, after you sign up, the teams were divided based on where the need was, based on your experience level and making sure that there were good teams of experienced people going to both locations.
Yes.
We deployed to different locations, but at the same time. So yeah, I don't remember which one I actually wrote down. I might have just said, send me where you want me to go.
That sounds like
What?
you.
Yeah, it does. It would sound like me. Yeah, but but yeah, like when I enlisted originally, I knew that deployment would be part of it, and I I didn't know where that would be. That's not really my choice.
Yeah.
So the last one was in the Middle East, but the next one it might not be. I'm not sure. So by the time that I have to go, they're going to send me where they send me, and it'll be my time.
Yeah, that's cool. So once you found out, like, how did you prepare?
When I found out how to, so you've known me for a while.
Yeah. I know you didn't prepare when you found out, but before you left,
Yeah, that's a
did you
awkward.
do
That's an
before you
awkward question. Prepare. What is? Can you define?
did you just like get on the plane and say YOLO or
Oh,
of course I know you
yeah.
have to do something.
It's a really good question. As you know, preparation is not a strong suit of mine. It's not part of it's not an integral part of my temperament. So I packed a bag. They told me these are the items that you need to bring, and I packed them, and you know, and I went. And so, in some ways, I wish I had been more prepared for just to. I don't know how I would have prepared if I knew that emotionally it would be difficult to be away from my son.
Yeah.
But if I had known ahead of time, then I might have asked more questions of people who have gone before and what they did to get through it,
Right.
and just been more prepared with what type of support I can tap into when I
Yeah.
was there. So that's yeah, it's something that I could have asked around and been better prepared for. So I was also at the time in a long term relationship with a woman,
Mhm.
and I wish that I had understood how difficult that would be
Mhm.
for to be apart for me and for her.
Right.
So for me, it seemed for me I had several years in the military to know that when it's my time, I'm leaving,
Right.
and so when my time came, in many ways, I was prepared to go. But I was also at the time in a relationship with someone who she needed to say goodbye to me and be apart from me for 6 months, and
Mhm.
so there are programs, and we did do a it was a weekend of preparation ahead of time to talk about what deployment is like, and so there was it was a conference that we went to understand that. So she was able to come with me, but in many ways, for someone who is not accustomed with the military, she hasn't had a lot of experience with that. She felt more overwhelmed than when we started in a lot of ways, because
Mhm.
it's just a lot of realities about how the military operates that she wasn't already used to. So again, I think that's where my I'm not it's not my strong suit to prepare. In some ways, I can be really easygoing, and whatever happens happens. That can be a strength at times, but also I I don't have a great answer for you for how I prepared, because I dropped the ball in a lot of ways in making sure that um, the people I was leaving behind were ready for 6 months of me not being there.
Yeah. I think that's a really honest and helpful reflection that maybe somebody watching this right now may be like, oh, you know what? Maybe I should check in with these people because I am about to leave. So I appreciate you verbally processing and reflecting on that because I think it is, it could be helpful for someone. And so, question with like, okay, so you got there, you were like, oh, wait, maybe I should have prepared more. How did you readjust once you returned? Because for me, I feel like that would be super hard. Obviously jet lag, but then all the other things of like, wow, I've been away, like kind of readjusting to life. So what was that experience like for you?
It's a good question. So the advice that I got before I returned was that I should plan a trip with my son to go away, to to take a vacation, do some camping, just him and I. And I
Yeah.
think that was really, really good advice, because it was 6 months of him growing and maturing at age 8.
Absolutely.
A lot can happen, and 6 months of me living in a more regimented culture
Absolutely.
than I have here at home. So it's just a situation where, you know, what I was told is that it wouldn't be good for me to come home and speak to my 8 year old in the way that we might speak to each other at work in on deployment, you know,
Yeah.
and so and who knows what emotions he would be going through, and so I was just encouraged to take time to decompress with him, and so I'm glad that we had that time, him and I, and it
Absolutely.
was good, and truthfully, for us, it wasn't difficult, at least from my perspective. You know, I being a dad is my favorite. It's my favorite thing about my life, and
Mhm.
so it seemed like he was ready for me to be back, and so it wasn't difficult for us to reconnect after I got back. But there is something about that. Okay, so as difficult as it can be to be away from family, deployment life in many ways is simpler than my civilian life. You eat at the same place every day, right? You know where your meals are coming from. You don't have to prepare them. You know where your work site is. You know where your friends are. You
Yeah.
know what activities you have going on, during the day of the week. Sometimes the meal schedule, it repeats, and so you know what you're going to eat. And so there's a lot of aspects of life on deployment that are just part of the routine, so it's figured out for you.
Yeah.
And coming back to living in the United States, there are things that I needed to adjust to. Right, I need to do this for myself again. And so I took time off of where I didn't rush back to my civilian job, which was important. And so that's part of the structure of returning from deployments is, that the Air Force provides time for you to not work
That's
and, to reconnect with your family. And so I didn't go back to my civilian job right away. And I think that was really, really helpful for me to get in the swing of things again.
yeah. That's really cool. So, and that I was gonna ask about like the civilian job piece. Is there like special protocol for people who get deployed, or like how does that work? I don't know how much you know. How does that work?
Yeah, 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 yeah. So how does that work? For me, it, I told my employer, actually I was employed with them when I enlisted in the Air Force. And
Oh,
so I just said, that I am enlisting and that's going to require me to go away, and my employer was supportive for me to
oh,
do that. So what it's meant is that they didn't have me for 7 months of training. I wasn't working there for 6 months of deployment. And there are other times that I'll travel with the Air Force for work, shorter terms. But my employer has been supportive about it, and so I haven't had issues with that. So there are protections that um, that with a duty to the government, that my a position is protected for me and my civilian job. And so that's really nice to know that when I was deployed, that I would be able to come back to a job and an income,
yeah.
even if I didn't have a supportive employer, which I do. My job was going to be protected, and so there was no stress for me surrounding that, which is nice.
That's really awesome. So to wrap up, is there like just any advice? Because I know we talked about the advice for parents. We know we talked about mental health is like super important, but there just any like lingering advice that you would give somebody who has recently enlisted or anybody who's currently preparing, as some people do, for deployment or whatever the case may be? Any advice that you have as we wrap up?
Probably should have thought of that. Probably should have prepared. So yeah, advice that I have. I think what I've already said about community is one of the best pieces of advice I could give to anyone. Don't be isolated. And you know what? The Air Force is actually good at stressing the importance of that. To not be isolated and providing, like I said, chaplaincy and mental health. And so there's a strong support system. So I would encourage anyone on deployment. I'm sorry, anyone in the military to take advantage of the support that the Air Force provides, to not isolate from your team. If you're traveling with your team, we do a good job in my unit of building camaraderie with each other. If we're on a job, whether that's locally in the States or otherwise, we work hard, and then after off work hours, we're always going out to dinner together. And so just make sure that you're part of that team. And and two, that there's a piece of that community where look out for each other. If you feel like you're connected with the team and you get somebody new on your team, that I th- I think it's important that we look out for each other, and so you got somebody new, make sure that they get the invite. You know, we're going to dinner, we're going to meet at the DFAC at this time,
Mhm.
whatever it is. And so the community piece is really the biggest advice that I could give.
Thank you, thank you, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for just being open and honest with people. And I appreciate having you on today. And thank you all
Yeah.
so much for watching another episode of A Transplant's Tale. See ya! Thank you for listening to another episode of A Transplant's Tale. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. See ya!